Meet Gary, the new Prime Minister of Australia.
Who's bloody Gary?
Given that we keep going through so many Prime Ministers and that 2/3 of Australians don't trust the government and media, Gary just decided to appoint himself as the new Prime Minister.
Did he fucking do that?
Don't worry, Gary actually understands the real problems and truly wants to help out his Australian family. He has to be better than what we've had before, at the least.
Agree.
Yeah, too right.
Yep.
Right on the
Aussie police suck balls.
So here's what he's going to do for Australia. He hopes that the rest of the world will follow his lead. First, he wants to help Australians to refocus on some important values.
What
the fuck do you mean, Gary?
Gary reckons that we should hate less and love more, hold great respect towards ourselves and others, accept our differences so we don't always need to agree, start listening to each other's concerns more, especially with that crazy split between the left and right.
You've got stuff all chance in that, Gary.
Rise above the us versus them mentality by focusing on our common ground, such as that we all just want a better future for ourselves and our children.
Touche, Gary, touche.
Desire the truth, no matter how much it might hurt at first. And strive for health over suffering.
Yeah, that's that. Like it.
Gary, dropping some truth bombs.
He will also respect some general principles, such as that each individual has the supreme authority over themselves, while still being held accountable for doing no harm unless in self-defence. He wants Australians to feel truly free, not trapped in the system. That we should decentralise the government and increase localisation, which simply means a less intrusive and more service-based governmental system so that local communities are responsible for their own decisions and they have the power to produce their own food and resources. That's because Gary knows that corporate monopolies are generally toxic to our health and wealth. And that ultimately justice should be served for our people and our environment.
Now you're speaking our language.
Now, Gary wants to make some real changes in our society.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, what, Gary, what do you want? What do you want to do, mate?
What the fuck are you going to change?
First though, he understands that our social system has the potential to evolve through many incarnations over the coming decades and centuries, but he also accepts that we need to take baby steps in the meantime. So to begin, he wants to look after local communities by reducing the toxic impacts of sprays and chemicals by industrial agriculture, removing neurotoxins from the water supply, building local and regional polycultural food systems to repair our environment and prevent further destruction, helping local farmers to make a better living off their hard work, and teaching kids, and adults for that matter, to understand what healthy food truly is.
Oh yeah, but I'm not giving up my works burger.
He also wants to move away from oil-based plastics and fuels that are bad for our environment, industries that cut down our forests unnecessarily, and most of our resources being produced in other nations, to plant-based plastics, fuels, building materials, and thousands of other products that are made locally and safe for us and the environment. That's why he wants to fund large-scale permaculture and hemp farms where the final products are locally produced.
Did he say No, we've been using hemp for years.
That's right, we've been using hemp for millennia. It's time to bring it into the 21st century. All that combined with open source, inexpensive industrial machinery and equipment, and Gary has created countless jobs for rural communities and revitalised our local economies.
I fucking love you, Gary.
Hold on. Because he has helped communities to be more self-sustainable, he's also safeguarded them from national or global financial shocks or meltdowns brought about by the banking and finance sectors.
Oh yeah, take my panties, Gary.
He also wants to build widespread indoor vertical farms in city environments, build fuck-off water pipelines from high-rain areas to farm dry but arable land, and build high-speed rail networks right around the country. Gary will also provide support for people who don't want to live in a city anymore to move to a rural community to spread out our population and make sure there's enough Australians for these projects.
Yeah, come here. I want to move.
Where do I sign? I'm sick of the city, I want to move.
Gary will also support communities which want to test out local currencies as well as a resource-based economy. These will be pilot projects to see how they might be integrated as the social system evolves. Now moving on, Gary knows that you don't like multi-billionaires controlling the flow of information and therefore the official truths in our society. Whether it's the dinosaur mainstream media or big tech from Silicon Valley, Gary believes that free speech is integral to a free society. So he's going to use the Australia Post network to build public software and hardware packages to make sure Aussies always have access to all the information, which will ensure the evolution of discourse and knowledge can always occur. That means no censorship for Australians, even though Gary wishes that some people would show more respect with their right to free speech.
Shut up, dickhead.
Next, he's going to buy back some of our public assets, including land, ports, water, power, hospitals, motorways, and airports. That's because Gary knows we need public infrastructure to make essential services affordable and to ensure the private market, including those monolithic monopolies, are not ripping us off.
Yeah, they're doing us over. Love it. Love your work, mate.
Gary's also going to make sure we can create our own medicines if we want to,
I'm gonna make a magic potion.
while still giving us affordable access to all the great achievements that have come out of modern medicine. This includes integrating hypnotherapy into mainstream treatment services because the clinical research clearly shows it is way more effective than just using traditional cognitive behavioural therapies. For those in need, Gary recommends Phillip J. Watt from healbyhypnosis.com. Gary is also going to overhaul the education system, which he knows is really important to many of you.
Oh, Gary's thinking of the children.
The current curriculum will be condensed into half the time and is going to fill the other half with many skills that our children can take with them for life. Whilst he's caring for our kids, he's going to care for the carers too. He knows that teachers, nurses, social workers, mentors, police, and other people who care for their communities deserve much more economic respect than what they get, so he'll put in a plan to make sure they get paid better to attract even more great people to these sectors.
Well done, mate. Hooray for community people.
Yeah, carers rock.
Gary's also going to create jobs for anyone who wants one.
My bloody kids need something to do.
So if you're unemployed but want a part or full-time job, it's yours. It's voluntary, of course, but if you want to work, Gary wants to make some greater use out of you. You'll be paid minimum wage, so to not compete with the private sector, but you'll get all the normal benefits and you'll get to choose from a list of needs identified by local community leaders and members. And they can be fun jobs too, like teaching children art, building and maintaining community gardens, playing music at events, or whatever else the community can conceive.
I want to build sandcastles.
For the right-leaning free market types, there's no need to freak out because these jobs are transition jobs until the private sector is placed to hire them. Think of it as the government simply purchasing unemployment to increase productivity until the private sector can afford to purchase it instead. It's simply finding a nice balance on the public to private spectrum or the left to right spectrum. Now I hear you asking, how is Gary going to pay for all this?
Yeah, money doesn't grow on trees, Gary.
Yeah, mate, they're gonna pay for it all.
See, Gary understands how money in banking really works. When you get a mortgage or credit card debt, it wasn't transferred from another account, it is new money literally created out of nothing.
It's been out for years, mate. Come on, no way.
Yes way, it's just digits created on a screen. In Australia, most of the new money is created by private banks, but it should be done by public banks too. So Gary's going to create a national public bank just like the Commonwealth Bank of Australia used to be to keep those private banks honest. Gary will also create a network of local and regional public banks to make the banking sector competitive, as well as use the profits from money creation, which is the interest we pay on loans, to fund the public sector's role in these projects, as well as other essential services. They'll be managed locally, not at the federal level. So that's right, local public banks are making a comeback. No more free rides for the private banking cartels.
Get off the bank. Let's start rebuilding our communities.
Marry me, Gary.
And not only that, here's the big one. Gary understands that the government has a sovereign currency called Australian dollars. He knows that the government can create as much money as it wants because it creates the currency in the first place.
Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Oh, really?
Yes, think about it this way. Governments with sovereign currencies can never go bankrupt because they created the money supply. The Australian government is not like normal households or businesses. Now I'm sure some of you are screaming Venezuela right now, but you need to understand they owe a lot of money in another currency, which is US dollars. So as long as it's managed domestically, the government can fund whatever it wants to. The only real limit to spending is, of course, inflation.
Oh, yeah, inflation, Gary. What about it? What about it, mate?
That's what I was thinking. What about the inflation?
Well, there are two ways. Gary can choose to increase taxes or decrease government spending. I'm sure most people would prefer the latter, but regardless, it really is that simple. By controlling the addition and subtraction of currency within the supply, you control inflation. It's just balancing the books. Therefore, if you have a budget surplus and you have unemployment issues and services which are underfunded and under-resourced, then you've got incompetent people running the government.
Of course, we've got people running the government.
no bloody idea what they're doing.
So remember, government money is just an accounting spreadsheet on a computer. So Australia can run as big a deficit as it wants to, as long as it only owes that money to itself.
Oh my god, I think you blew my mind.
Now Gary knows this might be a little hard for you all to understand, given that we've all been told something completely different for so long. He knows even the mainstream economists are struggling to get their heads around it because they've been indoctrinated into their own dogmas for decades. Of course there's deeper details, but Gary's just laying out the big picture for you so that you're aware of how money and banking works, including how we can best utilise it for our future wealth and prosperity. And don't take Gary's word for it and how money is created out of nothing. Even the Bank of England admitted it in 2014, which created a massive shift in academic and public perception. So to really push the point home, the entire money and banking system is just numbers on a spreadsheet. That's it. In very simple terms, that's how it fundamentally works in Australia, America, Canada and most other countries. Not for the governments in Europe though, because most of those countries gave up their sovereign currencies when they joined the EU. No wonder many of them are preparing to leave. Anywho, so Gary will fund all these projects and more. It will transform Australia's economic and social landscape.
I can't wait for this new future.
You bloody know. Sounds pretty fucking good to me.
But Gary also wants some other changes.
More.
Yes, more. Gary wants to give the power to the people. He will make sure that all law is aligned with the Constitution. He will recognise the Bill of Rights in that Constitution because individual rights are a no-brainer in a free society. He will also change the electoral system so parliamentarians represent their communities, not follow toxic party politics, as well as ban political donations and instead provide candidates with equal public funding for their campaigning, which will encourage more great Aussies to run for government who actually want to work on behalf of their communities. Sanction independent investigations into entrenched corruption in our government.
You can see them all quitting now.
He will also ensure that policies designed to benefit the people and the environment, not those with lots of money. Provide publicly funded, peer-reviewed scientific research to ensure that the very best science reaches all Australians. Remove property taxes so that once you own your property, you have the freedom to be self-sufficient if that's what you want. After all, Gary believes in a voluntary society, not one driven by force. Abolish the complicated tax system and replace it with a simple transaction tax. Put an end to that failed war on drugs by decriminalising use, educating and regulating the market, and treating addiction as a health issue, not a criminal one. Resolve the severe crises of homelessness, mental and physical health pandemics, domestic violence, entrenched poverty, and many other socio-economic issues. Introduce advanced healing techniques to break the cycle of self-abuse and crime. And finally, Gary will ensure the major concerns of the Australian people are broadcast to the entire country, which will ensure a more educated populace and rectify the disenfranchisement which exists right across Australia. Now of course, these aren't Gary's ideas, these were designed by many people way smarter than him, so he'll need these many great Aussie experts to step up who specialise in all this and more. So that's it for now. Gary's flipping the switch and returning the power to the people. Gary will clearly be the greatest people's Prime Minister that Australians have had so far.